Hi everyone, welcome back to Face It with Dr. G. I'm Dr. G and I have the pleasure of having this brilliant scientist with me today, Sophie Bai. She has completely made me mind blown with all of her accomplishments to date. She has a passion for science and she developed it at a young age. She discovered an anti-aging compound at the age of 16. She also has a minor planet named after her, which I want to learn all about. She studied chemical engineering with a focus on biomedical engineering at MIT, and she worked on developing various drug delivery technologies to find cures for prostate cancer, lung cancer, and type 1 diabetes, which is very near and dear to my heart because my husband has type 1 diabetes. Sophie invented and co-invented and patented multiple proprietary molecules to provide cures and management and treatment for atopic dermatitis, which I also struggled with as a child, skin cancer, and skin aging. She's a serial entrepreneur. She founded PPE
First. It's a mouthful.
People First.
Yeah.
A venture philanthropy vehicle that procured 2 million pieces of N95 respirators, surgical masks, medical gowns, face shields, and gloves to donate to 27 hospitals and senior care facilities in Massachusetts during the peak of COVID in 2020. She's also the founder of BAI Biosciences, Inc. She was a healthcare and life sciences investor at Bain Capital Private Equity and a management consultant at Boston Consulting Group, advising pharmaceutical and beauty companies. She received her Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from MIT and her Master's of Business from Harvard Business School. She is beyond phenomenal. I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. And I have lots of questions.
Yeah.
I want to know first, so you came to the United States at a young age. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in China where it's super populated. So my entire province has 200 million people, but not a single good tier 1 school, not even top 50 school in my whole province. So education resources were so scarce, and I knew at a young age that in order for me to get better opportunities, I need better education. And that means I need to compete in math and science to basically be selected nationally. That's how I can get better education. So that's what I did. I started competing when I was 7 years old. And started doing that for about 7 years. And then I made it to number 1 in my province. And that's when I was selected for the national science team. And so I was, airlifted to Shanghai and start training there and to compete on behalf of China. So I had a really abnormal childhood growing up and didn't really watch TV.
When you say compete, what do you mean by that? And was that your facilitator to get to the United States, or was that your plan? Or
so I never thought I would come here, right? Because when I was just growing up in a small town, I didn't even know I could go outside of the country, right? So especially that was, almost 30 years ago. So I just knew it was, I think, to put in the extreme terms, kind of like survival mode, right? Kind of, I know if I didn't do this, I was not able to get opportunities or education that I wanted, right? So I think that was something that I told myself I just have to be good at. And competing, which means typically are tests, right? Like a very advanced math, physics, chemistry test at a young age, right? Because I started learning physics when I was 8 years old.
Wow.
So it's abnormal, I have to say, at that time. But, we had many kids who were like me trying to compete at a young age and, just hoping for a better opportunity, hoping to get into better schools within China.
Within China.
Yeah.
Okay. And where were your parents? Were they pushing you to do this, or was it all self-driven?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question that I've been battling for myself, right? Because I don't have kids right now, but in the future I want kids, and I'm thinking about how do I, I guess raise my kids. I think, people argue it's nature or nurture. I would much argue it's more nurture in my experience. But again, both my parents are engineers. So my dad is a electrical engineer. My mom is a mechanical engineer. So I think they influenced me as a young kid, that knowing that becoming an engineer, having real hard skills is what you can, make it out there in a society. So that's what I knew, that I wanted to, I guess, do something in the engineering science realm of things. But, I didn't go to either of their disciplines, right? Like my mom designs engines for motorcycles.
Wow.
Which is super cool. And my dad does, the utility electricity side of things. But I was very drawn to medicine because my mom was ill when I was young. So I saw her taking those pills and then she can feel better. And as a young kid, I was like, wow, that to me is magic, right? To me, that's kind of like the Hogwarts moments, right? Like you have those like magic wand, and then all of a sudden can turn people into different things. So that's what drew me to medicine, and I think that's when I first started developing my interest in biology and chemistry.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So you competed and you went to school in China?
Yes.
And you finished, and then what made you choose MIT and Harvard? How did you end up over here?
Yeah, so education in China is very different. So all the best schools in China are actually public schools. Very low tuition. It was like $300 a year.
300.
Yeah. Wow. So like but it was kind of like a merit based. So it's all test based. So every 3 years they do like a whole citywide test. The top ranking, let's say, like 500 kids go to the school. So it's kind of like that. So I would say that built a really solid foundation for me because China really focused on STEM education, right? So it's like really hardcore math training. And then, when I started competing on behalf of China, it was internationally. And then I got to meet people or kids my age, around the world. And the judges, were professors of different universities around the world. And when I went internationally, that's when, MIT and Caltech offered me to study there. And, that's the first time I realized, I can actually go abroad to go to college. Wow. So that's when, I made the decision, wanted to come to the U.S. and then decided to come to MIT.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so when they offered you that position, were you ready to go to college, or was that
a
long time before?
I was 17 at the time.
Wow. And so when did you actually start college?
18.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is so incredible. Congratulations on all of
you.
that. I think it just emphasizes how education and knowledge are power.
Yeah.
And my parents would always tell me, you can always choose to work at McDonald's, which is a great, a job that you can have, but if you don't succeed in academics, you will be limited.
Yeah.
And so why not use your mind, expand your mind as much as you can so you're not, you don't have walls or boundaries. And I think for you, your knowledge was power. And I agree, it's more nurture, but you have to have an innate desire for learning and education and have the discipline and have the strength to do it, because it's a lot of work, obviously.
Yeah, I'll definitely, even in my program, right, that was the national science team was 5 girls, 37 boys.
Wow.
So I think we never thought about the gender equality or disparity, but, it's kind of when you're in that mode, you can't think about all the things that could potentially hurt you or bring you down. All you think about is how to win, right? So, but also, it's kind of like when I was competing, right, I felt like it was my kind of like, understanding how lucky I was, thinking about, talent is everywhere, but opportunities are not, right? So I'm sure I'm not the smartest kid in China. There's no way, right? There's like almost 2 billion people at this point, and I got lucky, again, those tests were like, if you fail once, you're doomed, right? So you have to be constantly good at, and you can't even, fail once, right? So that could be deemed unfair, or people can get unlucky, right? So I think I was definitely on the luckier end that constantly performed in those tests. But, coming here, I think what US does really well is like very merit-based, right? To your point on having education changed my life, right? Like I'm thinking about the number 2 in my province, right? I was number 1, number 2 in my province. He still is in my province, and, working at like I would say like a lower wage job, but he's just as smart as me. If at times can be smarter, but I said I was just a luckier one at education, changed my life, and coming here and especially in this environment in Boston, right, which a lot of things are merit based, and I definitely feel like I benefited a lot from being in an environment where my skills were being valued and I was being supported by the resources in the environment.
Yeah. I have one more question on just the tests because I'm just fascinated by this. How did you train your mind? What were the tests like, and how did you study day in and day out? What did you do to get so good?
That's a great question. So actually, when we were, I think China in general is, I think, still so pro STEM, right? So when we're in kindergarten, we had to know everything about like multiplication and like a division, like that was like kindergarten, yeah. That was a bare minimum, so we already knew that. I mean, that was almost 30 years, that's 30 years ago. Yeah, that's 30 years ago. So I think in elementary school we already started like learning the basics of calculus.
Wow.
Yeah. So it wasn't just me alone, right? Because there's actually programs for people who wanted to specialize in math and science and who wanted to go down the path of competing. It's actually a full program of it. So it's basically classes outside of school, that you have more advanced trainings and teachers teach you those things, right? So we basically kind of like go to two schools, right? So because in China at that time, our school starts from 7 a.m. and ends at 5. And then after 5, and then we'll start this kind of training school from 5 to 9.
Wow. So you were in school 12 hours a day, essentially.
Yeah.
From 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then you probably had homework to do.
Yeah, correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did you do to relax? Did you do anything to help your mind relax at all?
I think, that's such a great question because, when you look around, everybody is doing the same thing. And you don't really think about you need to relax. Right, it's kind of like you don't see kids playing, and you don't see relaxation. You don't see R&Rs, and everybody's doing the same thing. So, I guess that's what I think for us as kids, that we don't complain or we don't feel FOMO when I guess we don't even know other kids are having a fun time. But we just made the most out of it, and we made school fun, right? Like I think being able to tackle really difficult problems, that's very satisfying to us, and being able to finish homework early, that's very satisfying for us. So I just think the life back then were just much simpler, right? Like you don't have a lot of distractions or even options at that time, and by default you don't have such a high expectation of what you think your daily life should be, that you're not there yet.
And when you say back then, I laugh internally a little bit because you're very, very young.
Oh, so thank you.
When you say back then, as in 30 years ago or whatnot, I mean, it's a long time for you, but it's not really in the scheme of things. And I do think, it's changed, and culturally things are very different. Mm-hmm. And so I hope that people that are listening to this maybe have your kids listen to it, just to get some perspective on education in different countries and how it works, and expectations, and how things here in the United States seem to be just handed to people, and they don't think that any hard work goes behind it. And you're just such an extreme example of that, obviously.
Oh, thank you. I really think that, thinking about what we had to do growing up, like everything we just had to work so hard for, and because we worked so hard for, we cherish them more, right? We value them more. I mean, like time is different, right? Now, right? But I do feel like there are so many things that young kids can take for granted, right? In today's environment, and you like not. I think a different standard of what working hard means, and different standard of what excellence means, right? So, but again, that's something I think I'll have to learn once I become a parent, understanding, their world, how their world has been drastically different than how I grew up.
Yeah. And I think you can shape, the brain, it's called neuroplasticity, right, is very able to be shaped and morphed, and the neurons can learn new things all the time. And so we go into this structured system in the educational system in the United States, and you're expected that certain things happen in certain grades, but you can always try to push the limits, work a little bit harder. And it's amazing. Okay, so let's keep going because we could be here forever. So at age 14, you were selected for that National Science Program.
Yeah.
You went through that whole thing. So you're showing up now to MIT. Mm-hmm. How was that for you? Was that a culture shock? Were you aware of it? Had you visited before? You had, right?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't visit any of the schools. So I had absolutely no idea, right? Like, again, choosing between MIT, right? I was just like, I don't know. I think ultimately I chose MIT was because they actually made an exception, allowed me to work at Bob Langer's lab when I was a freshman, right? That was like unheard of at that time. So working with PhDs and postdocs. It's a funny story. I don't know, we can air that or can cut that. But so the water polo coach reached out to me asking me to join the water polo team. I was like, I've never ever even seen water polo.
What is it?
Yeah, what is it? And they just said, oh, you said you know how to swim. I was like, so that will make me a water polo player. It just shows how few women in, right? So there's not a lot of women to start with, and then picking women who know how to swim, you probably don't even have enough manpower to make a water polo team, like a women's team. So that kind of like, oh, that's a little weird. Like, what other sports I want to be putting me? Like, I'm a good like sports person, none of that. So, but okay, MIT seems more normal. They never asked me to join any sports team yet. But jokes aside, coming here, I didn't really speak any English. But luckily, right, like science and math are, you don't really need to speak a lot to get by, right? When you're doing tests and it's all like numerical numbers or symbols, like that's kind of universal globally. But I think the biggest culture shock, rather than not understanding the language perfectly to start with, was more about the choices that were given to me, and I have to make decisions for myself. Wow. That was something new to me at an 18-year-old, because before it was kind of like I had one choice, is just compete. I have to win, compete. That was my whole life, right? I didn't feel like I can do something else. But here it was like, wait, you can choose your dorm, you can choose your sorority, and you can choose your classes, and you can choose your major, and I was very overwhelmed by that. I was like, I was not really given the opportunity to choose, and what if I choose wrong, right? So that was giving me a lot of anxiety. But, I think I had to learn how to choose for myself, and how learn not just to say no, but understanding something are just not for you, and then you're okay, admitting that it's not for you and be okay with doing something else. So that was very, very new to me at that time.
Did it make you think at all about your past and how you realized that you didn't have decisions, but you never realized that before?
Yeah, that was definitely giving me like a crisis moment at that time. But I think, it's pros and cons, right? When I was a kid, I didn't have a choice. I felt like it was making my life simpler in a way, right? So I think I was lucky that all those choices made for me, I were able to excel. Right? But again, if you think about kids, let's say they weren't given the choices, but they weren't good at the path they were put on, that would be miserable. So again, that's why I was like kind of like lucked out, right? Like my talent and the path I was put on kind of aligned.
Who made the decisions for you in China? The teachers?
I would say it was like a general environment, right? Like in order to get ahead in like academically, right? Because it's like you need to get into a good middle school in order to get into a good high school. You need to get into a good high school in order to get into a good college. If you don't get into a good college, your life is doomed. Mm-hmm. So that was a mentality, right? So I think really, really focus on academic is what the whole macro environment is putting all the kids on.
Mm-hmm. And as you said, you didn't do anything else. So when you got to MIT, there are all these other options, sorority and all that. So did you do sorority?
Yeah,
what were your decisions?
Oh my gosh, I did. I remember when I came here, like my parents were like, Sophie, you just need to embrace everything about American culture. And I was like, okay, so sign me up for everything. So I, went through sorority recruiting and all that. So yeah, I was in a sorority. I ultimately became like the VP of my sorority. So, I would just be really open-minded, right? So I think just trying to learn and experience, right? So like without any judgment of anything. That was my mentality coming in to MIT. But MIT truly is just an amazing place. Everybody's so smart, and people truly value about excellence, intellectual capacity. That's being valued more than anything else, right? So there weren't a lot of, let's say, social pressure per se that kids nowadays face a lot. It just people want to be around with smart people, and people want to, tackle problems together. That truly, I think MIT is a really special place. But yeah, I had a great time, and I mean, we all suffered a lot together too at MIT, right? It's really a hard place, right? So, but those 4 years are truly transformative for me, at least.
So when you had your first discovery here, well, just tell me more about how NASA named a planet after you. That's number 25045.
Yeah, that's truly is a fun fact, because I remember when people ask, sometimes when you meet people at those gatherings, people always want to throw like icebreakers, right? Tell like a fun fact about yourself, and I would throw this, and everybody was expecting me to say it's a joke, right? It's not a joke. So it was, when I discovered an anti-aging compound when I was 16 at that time, and NASA and MIT Lincoln Lab just named a minor planet after me to, I guess, celebrate my achievement as a young scientist. Like they gave me this huge book of like where this minor planet is, and the diameter of it, which is like 3 kilometers, which is actually huge. Wow. And if you think about like a real estate value, like nowadays you think about Boston, New York, it's like, wow, I actually have something in the outer space. Does that make me ultra wealthy? I don't know. But again, that part is a joke. But that was basically it was because of my scientific discovery at a young age that they awarded me that.
So tell us more about that discovery.
So it's actually, when because I was basically competing in both biology and chemistry. And then because, I was so drawn in medicine, so what I was doing at that time was I was really looking into traditional Chinese medicine. But then again, because all of the trainings I've had were very Western type of training, right? Like you need to understand single compound, single molecular level of interactions to make a case of certain things to work or not, right? So, and Chinese herbs are a bunch of mixtures, like thousands of compounds. How do you know what's working, what's not? So that's when I had this idea that why don't I use a Western method to actually isolate compounds from those Chinese herbs and to see if things work or not. So at that time, my grandpa, he has arthritis. So he has been drinking this Chinese medicine-made drink for like a decade, and he said it's really helping him. And when I was looking at it, it's a very common arthritis kind of herb in China. So then I was looking at, so what's exactly that's in it that's, I guess treating arthritis, which is inflammatory condition. So then I start isolating that plant in terms of like isolating different compound, which took me like 2 years. And eventually we isolated a compound that was never ever being discovered before. And then we showed that compound is very, very strong anti-inflammatory, and regulating gene 16, gene 27, gene 53, P16, P27, P53. Those are commonly regarded age-regulating genes, right? So we were able to prove that, and we show extended lifespan in fruit flies. So by 20 to 30%, which is quite significant. I remember those days watching, because those kind of aging models, you can't just watch them die, right? So it's kind of like that's why you have fruit flies, because their average lifespan is about 50 days. That's manageable, right? Imagine you use another model to study, then you have to watch them for decades. That's not going to be feasible for, finding like anti-aging compound. So, basically did a bunch of in vitro, in vivo studies to prove this compound definitely have activities to slow down aging or extend lifespan. So that was how I discovered.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is it called? What's the compound called?
I actually don't have a name, right? Because it was new. So like the chemical structure was C20H30O.
Wow.
Yeah, there isn't a name for it.
You should name it after yourself.
I should have done that when I was 16, but past my prime time.
So that's amazing. Wow, very significant. Okay. And so then, and we'll get to where you are now, but what other, patents and innovations did you have or start or finish during MIT?
Yeah, so MIT, entering Langer Lab was, they have 100 plus PhDs and postdocs, the largest lab in the world. And, they all working on different things. And at that time, I was choosing among different, groups of what they're working on. And I chose prostate cancer because, at that time, I felt like I really wanted to cure cancer, right? As like a young and naive kid, right? I was 18, I want to cure cancer. So that's what I, end up doing for many years. And, that was a technology. It's smart. Basically, what happens is that it's a delivery technology that you can think about. We created a micro vehicle, like a car, and you put, very toxic cancer drugs in it, right? I mean, cancer drugs, they kill everything, right? Including your normal cells. So that car actually can bypass the detection of your immune system. But they can actually drive to your prostate cancer cells once, and they recognize the prostate cancer cells, and the car start to dissolve. And then the toxins or toxic actual cancer drug is, released just to kill those cells. So it's very targeted cancer therapy without damaging your own immune system, without damaging your own normal cells. So very promising. That passed phase 2 clinical trials, but failed phase 3. So it was unfortunate. But after that, I also did, type 1 diabetes, which, at that time, our team, we actually created this artificial pancreas. So basically, we used a very biodegradable, biocompatible materials to create this little ball. It's like this big that can act as a normal pancreas. So basically, if we implant that into your body, you don't need to be on any diabetic medicine for, I think that can live up to 7 years. Wow. So that's what we created at that time. So, work on so many different things, and people like jokingly say like they feel like I'm living in the sci-fi world.
Sounds pretty accurate. Wait, so is the artificial pancreas around now? Because I have heard of the artificial pancreas, but where does that stand?
So at that time, we finally figured out the thermodynamics to actually make it work, right? In terms of to pump out insulin on its own when the blood glucose level is high. So that was 2013. We did that. It's still, carrying out. I think, when I go to Bob's lab, Dr. Langer's lab, they still have the PhDs advancing where we left off for that project.
Awesome. And so you decided to take a detour after, or maybe not a detour, always a passion into diving into the skincare kind of field. When did you develop BAI Biosciences?
I founded Bai Biosciences in 2020, right before COVID, and then COVID happened. So I, even before that, I took an even bigger detour, right? So I went to management consulting and private equity. Yes. And the reason I did that is because after the cancer drug failed, I felt I was not smart enough to cure cancer, or let alone going to medical school. So I just felt like I was not that smart. I was like, I need to find a job.
Which, hold on a second, because that is wild. And I think everyone needs to hear this, because this is the epitome of imposter syndrome. and you are absolutely brilliant. But people that work so hard for things are also vulnerable, and we focus on the losses when all we do is win. And all you did was win your entire life.
Yeah.
And those losses took you to a place you hadn't ever experienced. And that is wild. So I'm sure there was a lot of emotion. Talk about how that felt.
Yeah, so I remember because, for the longest time, I knew my path was become a professor. Like, I wanted to become like a professor in chemical engineering, in biomedical engineering. I wanted to just create those like life-changing drugs. That was my passion for the longest time. But, I just felt like my senior year that got shattered, right? Like everything I was doing, right? Like I was minoring in biology and I was doing all the lab work and internships. Everything was leading up to become a professor. And I remember going to my college, my academic advisor, right, which is a professor at MIT. Every student has one. So you have to discuss your plan, right? Like I remember going to his office. I said, I don't have a plan anymore, and I feel ashamed of myself, right? I just felt like, okay, I just don't feel I'm smart enough to either go to medical school or go to grad school, and I need to find a job. And I felt very ashamed, felt embarrassed, felt I failed. Like I felt everybody's expectation and myself, my own expectation as well. I remember leaving his office, I cried for like 4 hours. And, just putting kind of what I thought that my life was going to be for the longest time. I'd have to all put that into the past and start over. Yeah, that was, Boston weather is always not nice. So like the weather didn't really help. Or walking out of his, office, like being so gloomy. And I was like, oh, yeah. But, like then just trying to find a job and, I think at that time, most companies recruiting on campus or Google, Facebook, it's a big tech company recruiting for computer science major people. So I'm not a computer science major, and the jobs who really don't care about what major you were in were either investment banking or consulting. So basically, that's why I actually ended up recruiting for those jobs. And luckily ended up they got a few offers and decided to join the Boston Consulting Group to become a consultant, but had absolutely zero experience in finance or in management or in business whatsoever. So that was quite a detour in terms of as a 22-year-old at the time.
Wow, you're 22 and working there. So obviously you're brilliant with math, so it makes sense that you would fit seamlessly into that culture, but how was the experience and what ended up happening?
So when I was, thinking about at that time working at the lab, like MIT does pay you, right, when you're a researcher at that time. I was being paid $8 an hour.
And to live in Boston, by the way.
Yeah. And then I also got another job during school that I was a teaching assistant for the physics department. So teaching like undergrad physics, and for that job I was making $13 an hour. I was like, why cure cancer and make less? But then starting at Boston Consulting Group, I was being paid a lot. I was like, wow,
yeah,
I got paid this much to do this, and I have no experience. I got to learn, so it was kind of like a paid business school for me.
Wow.
So that's, I really didn't feel the intensity. Yes, it's a very intense job, right? So that's why they pay you a lot. But I think MIT, I remember the first day of class at MIT for chemical engineering, the department head said that many of you will cry for the next couple of years, but trust me, if you stick with me for the next 3 years for chemical engineering and you get through that, nothing will be harder than chemical engineering in your life. Wow. So I remember that so clearly, and that has proven to be true so far. That, I think that really conditioned me understanding what true hardship and difficulty is, and then better prepared me to deal with kind of real life stress or real life problems.
It's all relative. So did you guys hear that? All of you private equity people. It's nothing compared to this.
Yeah, I can probably say that because, course 10 chemical engineering truly was brutal. And that's why, actually our class, I think, started by 110 people declaring that major. We graduated with 26 people.
Wow.
So.
Wow, and you were one of them. And then you had this time where you felt you weren't worthy in all of this when you're so worthy. But then see how you turn an experience, which I love because I'm such an extreme optimist that there are endless opportunities in life. But you turn the experience that was a secondhand option for you into, well, I'm going to use this as business school.
Yeah.
And I'm going to learn. And by the way, I'm worth this much money.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get paid. And there's a purpose for this.
Yeah.
And then you started the job and you're like, this is for losers.
Certainly, I think I truly learned a lot of this job, right? Like, it just used very different part of my brain, right? When I was at MIT, I was best friends with mice. Right? So,
and flies, Joseph.
Yeah, and then like now I have to talk to people. It's like, quite different, right? Because when you poke mice don't talk back, right? So it's a completely different world, I would say. But, I truly learned a lot, and business is fascinating. And I just like it using completely different muscle than the muscle I have to use, like pipetting or, and all that. But I would say without that experience in consulting and private equity, I wouldn't be able to start my business.
I was just going to transition there.
Yeah.
So talk about biosciences and was your path, did you think you would start your own company, or was that detour your purpose in life, essentially?
Yeah, that's a great question because, the reason I'm so obsessed with skin is because I have eczema and acne growing up. And when as a professional mathlete, right? Like I competed for a living, right? So
love that.
Yeah, I'm a mathlete, but terrible at any sports. So if you put me into any sports, trust me, I'll be the bottom. I always prepare, right, for tests, for competitions, and similarly to this public speaking contest that I was participating and I was representing my school for this citywide competition, but I was eliminated because the judges, who were teachers, said in front of an audience of 1,000 people that I looked ugly because of my eczema flare-up and my acne. So they kicked me out of that competition. And as an 11-year-old, I was like, wow, like that was my first time realizing maybe it's not about working hard, because at that time I thought as long as I work hard, I can always get something, right? That's why I think I'm so obsessed with working, because I felt like working was fair to me, right? School was fair to me. It was like, at least I put in something, I get something out of it. But that has kind of like shattered my philosophy, or like what I believed in terms of working hard, you can always get something. So that changed my personality, like be more reserved and, don't want to be seen, don't want to be seen by people and just felt like, oh, I'm ugly, right? Like people don't want to be around me, and because I'm ugly, like I cannot get certain opportunities, right? Proven for this public speaking contest. And the public speaking contest, the theme was how youth can contribute to the society. And I thought at that time, as a very well written speech that I memorized, and it was, actually looking through like historical facts and how people can start young, can do certain things, and in different dynasties or different part of the world can make a difference. And I was like, oh, I didn't even get to say that, and I was just eliminated because of how I looked. And I never knew a public speaking contest was a beauty contest, right? Like had I known it was a beauty contest, I would never like participated in the first place. But looking back in life, I felt like a lot of things in life shouldn't be beauty contests or beauty contests. So that was what I guess made me super obsessed with skin. And after that, I didn't eat lunch for a week. I saved my lunch money, which I think was about like $1.55 a day, to buy my very first foundation. I probably bought a fake because it was like in a very small, like Bottega store, and like it was my very first Maybelline foundation.
Mhm.
That was the only thing I could afford to cover up my acne and eczema. So I think as a beauty consumer, I've had like 24 years of experience. So but even because of that, I always thought like, oh, what if I can create a company or create something that can solve all the skin problems, right? That was something I wanted to do because of that. And then looking back to what I'm doing now, like I'm not somebody who believes in fate or believes in like a supernatural powers out there because I'm a scientist, but I just felt like everything I have done in the past kind of leading up to what I'm doing now. Because even when I was at Boston Consulting Group, I was advising like beauty companies and pharma companies. That was like, what, like all the experience somehow is related to doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah. And what you just said was intriguing to me because the first part of your life without the ability to make your own decisions, right? All of these things that you may not have even believed were decisions at the time, choices, or just, I don't even know what other way to put it, but it was a decision. Not necessarily that one is good or bad or that you win or lose, but they put you to a certain path or you take different directions. And you almost subconsciously were always drawn to that.
Yeah.
You were good at it. So now tell us about Pavise and how incredible it is, and I'm so excited to hear.
Yeah, so Bai Biosciences is built on the promise that because I'm a cancer drug developer before, I've seen all the amazing technologies being created for oncology, immunology, right? We can edit genes now. Come on, why do we only have retinol for dermatology? It's a huge discrepancy in terms of what treatment are available for certain therapeutic area which are deemed to be more life-threatening compared to derm, which are being perceived as more superficial. But let me tell you, like every single woman on this planet will tell you there are moments, if not many moments, they don't feel they look good. Right? It's much more than just skin deep or just superficial, right? Like how it impacted me when I was 11 years old, it changed my personality, how I looked. So I just think that we need more women to be in the driver's seat, understanding what's superficial, what's not, what's actually impacting us, and what's not. And that's where I wanted to medicalize skincare to make him seem more serious rather than it's just a pimple. Right, it's just eczema, right? So I think that's where I have this idea of having the most advanced technologies, best-in-class scientists working on those kind of, therapeutics to come to create solutions for derm, where everybody is a patient, right? So that's how Bai Biosciences was born. Dr. Bob Blanger is part of it, and also Dr. Lin from Yale, like head of Yale Stem Cell Center, is also part of it. So they all believe that we can make skincare healthcare. So we now have more than 20 patented molecules in the pipeline, ranging from skin aging and UV filters and eczema and hair loss. So Pavise is our first child coming out of Bai Biosciences using the Diamond Core molecule, the technology, which we created at our MIT lab to be the most potent, regenerative and protective skin treatment out there.
Wow, it's so incredible. So how do you, starting a company is one thing.
Yeah.
But starting a lab is another because you have to be funded.
Yeah.
And when you don't have a product that is making money, how did you do that? Did you use your private equity background to start?
Yeah, that's what I have to say. Like, I don't feel like any of my seemingly so irrelevant experiences were wasted, right? Like, I certainly was paid very, very well in private equity. And when I first started this, well, I guess, first of all, like, leaving private equity was a very difficult decision for most people because people call those people are golden handcuffed. You can't leave, right? Because how much you're being paid and how much of your paid are deferred into like the points or in the fund, right? So it's very difficult to leave, and it's very difficult to find a job that paid more than that, right? So that's why you don't really see people leaving that profession. But for me, I think it was I was I'm a workaholic. I'm a proud workaholic. So I love working. But it was just like to the point I was like, I still feel like I'm most excited reading some scientific breakthroughs from Nature or from MIT Review. I was like, oh my gosh, like now we can cure this disease. Well, now we can make, glass this thin. Like to me, those are my happy moments rather than we negotiate this debt rate to this low. Oh my gosh, it's not really. I don't get excitement from that. No, disrespect to there are people who are genuinely interested in that and who are fantastic at that job. I'm just not that one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I realized that I wanted to do something that I truly love, and I definitely felt like I was fortunate enough to be able to make that decision. So I left the job, basically taking an 80% pay cut, and use my savings to actually start buying equipment. I remember during COVID, I had to buy this DLS, which retail for $100K if I just buy it. But then I was able to find on eBay from a Germany lab. They're shutting down the lab, so they don't need that equipment anymore. So they're selling it for $30K, like 27.8. So I was like, okay, I want to buy it. But because it's on eBay, and then they're like, you just need to wire the whole thing, whole amount of money before we can ship it. I was like, how do I trust you? You're gonna, ship me this equipment, or even if you ship, how do I know it's working? It's not broken or something. And he was just like, you just gotta trust the Germans. So I was like, all right, I have no other choice. Wow. I basically wired $30,000.
Wow.
And then it's like, praying like I will get this piece of equipment. Because it was during COVID, in a couple of weeks, and it's functional. Thank God it's functional. So, so there were moments like that. I basically had to,
take risks.
Take risks. But also, Harvard gave me the startup funding to help me. So that helped me a lot in terms of, getting more up to speed. Because $30,000 is also not enough, right, to build a lab. So, yeah, I definitely feel like very fortunate, very grateful that I got the support from both Harvard and MIT supporting me to do this.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's so incredible. And to have all those molecules in the pipeline, I'm sure you're going to have so much success, and I cannot wait to hear about all of these things.
Thank you.
And I want to do a little bit of a pivot. We could definitely do a part 2 with this because there's a lot more to talk about. But I want to pivot just a little bit about women and women in business and women as entrepreneurs. And I know you're such a huge advocate, and I so look up to you. You have so many just incredible accomplishments so far, and I'm sure the rest of your life is going to be just over and over and over and over again. I encourage you to rest just a little bit. And I never say that to anyone. I'm like, rest? No. But I'm so proud of you. It's so incredible.
Oh, thank you.
And when it comes to women, what would be some advice that you could give future entrepreneurs or even future women? Let's just say entrepreneurs. Or women in math, or any woman.
I mean, you are somebody who is so accomplished and, having done so much and so talented. And let me ask you this. Have you ever felt being underestimated or being discounted?
I feel it all the time. And as a woman, I think that we try so hard to be created equal, but the reality is that we're still not. We're not there yet. We aren't perceived the same way. We will say the same thing as a man, and it's perceived completely differently. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to overcompensate a lot of the time, wear certain things to get the same respect that a man has. And it's hard, but I look at it as a challenge, and I say, I'm just going to keep, put my head down and do what I'm going to do and accelerate and excel. How do you feel?
Yeah, I feel underestimated all the time. I feel like if I'm not underestimated, there's something wrong. It's like up to this point, it's like, and over the years, I've tried different things, right? So I think, in the very early days, I have to forget that I'm a woman. I'm just competing with men, and I have to behave like them. I just have to think that I am a male. Like, I just have to do, how was kind of being graded on. I just need to kind of tick those boxes. But that doesn't work a lot of the time, right? So, because even if you say the same thing, using the same tone as men, they can call you bossy, or they can call you bitch, and they think you're too aggressive, right? But you're just exactly saying the same words or doing the same thing. I remember there was a time that, I was discussing just like a scientific fact about a paper, and it was truly fact. There was like nothing can be truly argued, right? It was just, this is a fact, this is a number. And it was like to a guy, and he I think like it either didn't read the paper wrong, had this argument with me that didn't believe what I said. So I basically had to pull up paper and say, those are the data, those are the facts, right? So I think women in general, we tend to prepare. We tend to be so confident before we even open our mouth. But a lot of men don't do that, right? They just say things with such confidence. And so it was to the point that what I was proven to be right was, not just us two, there were like other people there too. And I just didn't budge on the science, right? I was just defending science. And in the end, he was telling other people that I'm prickly.
Interesting.
And I was like, well, I definitely was like, oh, why defending science is prickly, right? Why defending data is prickly? But if that's how they think, right? Like if defending science is prickly, so be it. Then I'm prickly. Since then I was like on the hunt for like a prickly pear perfume, I was like, yeah, I'm prickly, so what? So, I think trying to make humor out of those situations, and I guess don't be, yeah, I got like beaten down all the time. But I think it's, in the end of the day, like I'm myself's best advocate, right? Like I need to help myself first before looking for others to help me, or before looking for others to support me. So I think I just have to, like always go out there. And I think for me, like my mechanism to, I guess, process is like I would be upset or be emotional by myself for like a little bit, and then like, okay, I cried, I'm done, move on, right? So like just don't ever go back to that, and
100%.
just continue to move forward. But yeah, so I think it's just understanding, like I can never be a man because I'm not a man.
No, we don't want to be men.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah,
but I totally
yeah, it's just still there's a lot of work to do, right? Like even in this industry, right? Like the majority of patients are female, but there are not a lot of, female voices that are at the top.
Well, that's exactly it. And so the industry or the field of medicine is very female oriented and also female provider heavy, but the people that are on stages and that are the plastic surgeons and that are doing the anatomy labs, the majority are men. And I think that the way that it's perceived, is that we have to worship those men. And whatever they say that comes out of their mouth, I don't even know who's speaking, maybe they just came out of nowhere and it's their first time on stage and they're just a king now. Whatever they say is you have to understand it. You have to believe it. I'm like, absolutely not. I'm somebody who asks questions. I look for the science. I look for the foundation, the fundamental knowledge and education. And I also am just very unique. There's nobody in this field that's a dermatopathologist, let alone a pathology trained dermatopathologist. And that put me in a weird space, right? So not only am I an MD, I'm a female, but I'm a dermatopathologist. It's like, where do I fit in?
Yeah.
And you have to create your space. And when you create your own space, you get pushback. And so you have to learn how to deal with that. And I'm the same as you, where I don't look to anyone for support or help. Until recently I've started. I'm a little bit older than you, and it's helped. It's not woe is me and I need sympathy or, blah, blah, blah. It's let me hear your opinion. And it helps you process things in a certain way, and it's been useful. I totally agree with you. Never look back, but always remember what brought you to where you are.
Yeah.
Don't look back and say, oh, what happened here, and have guilt. I don't believe in guilt. But even you just telling your story, I'm sure, brings up all of these emotions. I could tell at some certain points, brought up emotion for you with how incredible you are, how much you've done at such a young age, and how far you have to go. And it's really amazing.
Thank you. I remember, when I first met Dr. Barbara Gilchrist, right? So I was, she was asking me, why are you doing derm? And I said, when I failed, the prostate cancer drug, I just felt like I was not smart enough, right? I couldn't continue that path. I need to do something else. And then she left. And then she was like, Sophie, you've only failed once. Come on, once.
It's not even a failure, though, in my mind.
Right? So I think to her was like, come on, like it's normal to continue to fail, like fail all the
That's how you
time.
learn.
Yeah. So I think that really, helped me to have a different perspective, to feel like, oh, I guess I'm the lucky one. I've only failed once, right? Like, so it's not, I only failed once, not just, like where so many people out there, they are constantly failing. But again, I think we as a society should normalize failing, because you see all those success stories out there, but those are 1% of the time, right? Even those successful people out there with those successful stories, that you don't see the 100, 1,000 failures that lead up to them succeeding. So
but that last time they stood up again.
Yeah.
And all the times, all the pushback, all the setback, just
Yeah.
to get up again and keep going.
Yeah.
And that's called grit.
Yeah.
It's the grit. It's the determination. Yeah. Well, this has been amazing.
Oh,
we could go on and
you.
on forever. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story.
Of course.
For Sophie Bai's contact information, do you want to give it to everyone to follow you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, Sophie Bai, and you can find us at pavise.com, and you can also find us at biosciences.com.
Yeah, and she does do wholesale, right? So practices can bring her product in, and you can sell it to your amazing patients, and it's just the beginning.
Yeah.
So exciting. Well, thank you guys for listening. Like, subscribe, share, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.